Every parent wants the best possible future for their children. Every Briton wants the best possible future for this country. But what sort of foundations are we laying for the generations to come?
Well, I would say that we're betraying our grandchildren. This country is almost unique in the world in cutting its higher education and research. There must be a reason why everyone else is going in the opposite direction.
Whilst our trading competitors are clearly committing themselves by investing in a technological future, Britain has apparently decided that we cannot afford to stay in the race.
We're training fewer scientists and engineers than most Western countries. We are spending less money than most Western countries. We are beginning to turn ourselves into a society rather like Portugal and perhaps ultimately like Turkey, where technology is passing us by.
Good evening. Tonight, we're asking how close is Britain to becoming a nation of technological has-beens with a third world standard of living. 200 years ago, Britain became the richest nation on earth by creating the technologies of the Industrial Revolution and by selling the products of those technologies to everyone else. A mastery of trade followed on from a mastery of machinery.
Today, the rules of the game haven't changed, but Britain seems increasingly reluctant to take part. And all of us are going to have to live with the consequences of that. For the last quarter of a century, Britain's standard of living has been dropping steadily when compared to other advanced nations. Today, the following nations are richer than we are: Australia, Austria, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Finland, France, West Germany, Japan, the Netherlands, Norway, Saudi Arabia, Sweden, Switzerland and the United States.
And the gap between the United Kingdom and the most successful trading nations is widening ever further. 10 years ago, Britain's rate of overall growth was already behind our major competitors. Today, though, everyone's growth has slowed down. The United Kingdom is not even managing to keep up with the easier pace. A key factor is the dismal state of British science. We no longer produce enough of the right sort of graduates or school leavers to feed our technological industries. And that may not get any better in the future, because in our schools, the chances are steadily increasing that whoever teaches science these days won't themselves be a scientist.
Tonight, we're going to look at the crisis in Britain's science by examining one city, Southampton, and by focusing on its schools, its university and its employers to paint a picture of what's happening throughout the UK. Our investigation starts in Seagarth Street, in the primary class of Hollybrook Middle School, where we met some 8-year-olds taking their first steps in the world of science. All schools now teach some science at this age, offering a very general introduction to raise interest in scientific concepts. Here we found a teacher who knows exactly what he wants to achieve.
It's not so much teaching, but a discovery. The children are concerned with discovering for themselves, perhaps with my prompting at times. So we're trying to make them think for themselves. Children are discovering what hydraulics are before they actually know what the word hydraulics is. I would like to think that we're turning out all-round children, children who are not only have some idea of what science is about, but in the other areas of the curriculum as well. Science is not a subject on its own.
But new enthusiasm for science amongst our youngsters will only create frustrations for them later on in their school careers, because Britain is suffering from a chronic shortage of science teachers. There are currently at least 1,000 vacancies in the science departments of our secondary schools. And of those who are teaching physics, for instance, to our 11 to 16-year-olds, almost half did not themselves start off in physics.
Now, this would seem to make something of a nonsense of the government's recent advice that 20% of secondary school timetables should now be devoted to science. But to make that possible in many schools, pure science, separate chemistry, physics and biology, has been replaced by a new approach which amalgamates all three: integrated science. In Southampton, in Green Lane, Millbrook School has been teaching integrated science for almost 6 years. The teacher of this class, who has a degree in electrical engineering, is a firm believer in the integrated approach to science.
How will you know when you've added enough? By this method, we hope to get the pupils to use more of their initiative and find out things for themselves rather than them to be led by the teacher at the front of the class. We want pupils to be inquisitive, we want them to question their results, we want them to look at other things apart from the actual stuff that they read in books. Be able to look at a newspaper article, for example, and be critical in the way in which they understand that particular aspect of science.
Of course, integrated science hasn't meant that everyone is suddenly becoming a scientist. But at least some of these 13 and 14-year-olds have set their sights on a technological future.
I'm going to take science when I'm at college. I want to be a pilot when I grow up at British Airways.
I'm a radiographer, hopefully, you know, in a hospital. But I just like the machines sort of thing. It's nice and technical.
Stuart Machin also sees this course as a good springboard for a more academic future.
What we discovered is that the pupils have gone on from here to do A-level physics, chemistry and biology. The method of learning that they have encountered here has helped them far more than those people who have done a traditional physics, chemistry and biology course at other schools.
Things are rather different in the private sector. If King Edward VI School in Wilton Road were to meet the government target of 20% science in the curriculum, it would actually mean teaching less science here. The school has just opened a new Department of Design and Technology, widening the choice of traditional science subjects available here. Pupils feel that the way they're taught science gives them maximum advantage for the future.
With my theoretical subjects, I'm doing maths, physics, chemistry. It'll take me to university, and then I can choose what I want to do.
With maths, physics and chemistry, you can go into almost anything from management to research, and that's what more attracts me than engineering.
The gap between schools in the private and public sectors appears to be growing, and according to King Edward's head of science, the outlook for science education in this country is bleak.
There is far too little science being taught in schools at the moment, and the principal reason for that is no teachers. And there are no teachers, as far as one can see, in the pipeline, in schools like this, where the science tradition has been strong for many years. We are fortunate indeed to have large numbers of teachers who have done their first degrees at British universities and have, for whatever reason, decided to go on into the teaching profession. I think that in the short term, it is inevitable that the type of education in science that most children get in secondary schools will be of the integrated science type, and I regret to say that in my view this isn't science for all, this is inferior science for all.
Dick West, would you agree with that? Is integrated science inferior science for all?
Well, of course, you wouldn't expect me to accept that. I think that is a gross simplification. I would see integrated science as an ideal method of developing upon the very good work in primary schools, natural progression on into secondary schools, and through that providing a broad, balanced science education for all young people up to the age of 16. Now, clearly, integrated science programs must be properly designed, they must be properly resourced, and they must be properly taught.
Maurice Everson, does the integrated science approach worry you? If we're already short of physics teachers, where are they going to come from in the future?
Well, the Institute of Physics, of course, does face a dilemma. So much good work's been done in the integrated science programs that to argue against it is a little bit like arguing against mothers and apple pie. On the other hand, the Institute does have to concern itself with the progress of a reasonable number of physicists into the higher ranges of education. And I think this is where we would be worried. Providing the integrated science is done by good, enthusiastic physics teachers in part of a team, then I don't think we've got any worry. But in practice, what's going to happen, I think, is that the integrated science will be taught by chemists and biologists, and with the best will in the world, they won't teach physics with the same enthusiasm as they will teach their own subjects. And that is a worry to us.
And does that mean we're going to be going round in circles, then?
Well, clearly we do need to do something about the shortage of science teachers. And that shortage is a shortage whether we're teaching integrated science or physics or chemistry or biology. And I agree with Maurice, it's essential that we have good physicists, chemists and biologists working as teams, planning proper courses.
Do you think integrated science is in fact a way of getting round this problem with shortage, a positive way of getting round it?
No, I don't think it is. I think it would be quite incorrect to assume that by integration you're going to hide the critical shortage of science teachers in this country.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
What a youngster has learnt at school is vitally important to future employers. But how long they've been at school and the level of skills they've acquired is also important. Here too, Britain lies behind our competitors. Almost half of our young people leave school at 16. In Germany, only 38% finish their education at this stage. In Japan, it's as low as 13%, and in America, this statistic is only 6%. So whilst traditional industries, which used to employ 16-year-old school leavers, decline, the UK still has an alarmingly high proportion of its young people only qualified for jobs which no longer exist.
And the other side of the coin is equally true. Even though employers may have the vacancies, they find it increasingly difficult to fill them with suitably qualified applicants. Located at Millbrook Industrial Estate, the giant electronics firm Mullard is just one of the many large Southampton high-tech employers which finds it difficult to fit school leavers to vacancies.
People start to exercise their choices about what academic subjects they'll pursue at age 13, particularly what range of subjects they will take at O-levels and so on. And too many people at that age are closing doors to very useful careers which could be kept open if they stuck with science subjects for as long as possible.
But even if science subjects are pursued at school, there's no guarantee that industry will benefit.
It's still, in this day and age, very acceptable for people to go into academia, to go into the arts and social sciences, and to look down upon manufacturing and industry as not particularly socially acceptable career to pursue. And I think that image of industry being represented by William Blake's and Lowry's dark satanic mills is well and truly outmoded, but that is not the perception in society.
And that image probably deters another important source of talent.
It is surprising that so few girls actually end up in industry, and what we need to do is to get in at the time when people are exercising their choices of careers, and to convince more and more girls that careers in engineering and in industry are attractive to them and have as high a social standing, if not higher, than some of the things which traditionally they've been led to believe.
But if there are not enough girls getting into science in the first place, neither are there enough university science graduates getting into industry. At the University of Southampton, 20% of all last year's arts and social science graduates ended up without a job, but every science graduate prepared to go into industry had 5 or 6 jobs to choose from. And yet, like other British universities, Southampton does not have the funds to take on all those students who want to and who are qualified to study science. It's a national problem.
We graduate, I think, somewhere between 7,000 and 8,000 engineering graduates each year. You compare that with Japan, they graduate about 80,000. The French, about 3 times as many as this country.
I have telephone calls virtually by the week from industrialists, almost weeping down the phone asking for new graduates. At the same time, we are turning away 10 or more applicants in my department for every one we can take, and they are well-qualified ones. Of course, we're very privileged because we're a department of higher reputation, but the general scene is rather depressing, particularly from the industrialist point of view.
That view is confirmed at KBC Process Automation, a process engineering consultancy based at the Chilworth Science Park. They have difficulties in recruiting the right sort of graduates.
I suppose we must examine whether there is something wrong with the education, because we're not getting the recruits that we're looking for. There seems to be something lacking in the marketplace. If we can't recruit more, we can't have more on the ground, so therefore our income goes down, and so therefore our company growth is not as ambitious as we would like it to be.
Well, they're going to be bearing those.
So a shortage of appropriate skills may be limiting our technological and scientific progress. But it appears that the situation is made worse by science graduates finding non-scientific professions more attractive. That preference greatly concerns Professor Brignall.
I often think that this country is run by government of accountants, by accountants and for accountants. One of the most horrifying statistics I heard from my university is that 1 in 6 in its graduates actually go into accountancy.
Well, we'll become a society in which service industry, banking, tourism will become more important. And I think we will be culturally a rather peculiar society. We will also be giving up a heritage, a very proud heritage in this country, with a tradition in engineering and science second to none.
But apart from teaching, universities also carry out basic research for government and industry. This specialist microchip production unit, capable of producing small numbers of complex integrated circuits for research, is a good example of cooperation between universities and industry in the outside world. But industry is less interested in what happens during basic university lab research. When a potentially valuable spin-off like Dr. Neil Halliwell's laser vibration analyzer is produced, it's not always British industry which takes advantage.
It was offered to British industry, but they hummed and hawed and for quite good, sound financial reasons, and it was immediately snapped up by a European firm.
Industry could no doubt benefit from equipment like the analyzer, and yet it is just the sort of fundamental research which produces ideas like this which is now suffering most under Britain's programme of university cutbacks.
And unless that research is funded, i.e. unless universities are allowed to do basic research to work on ideas that don't necessarily produce end results, they're going to dry up. The sort of things you've been looking at are spin-offs from those basic ideas, and that's what universities are there for.
When it comes to the funding of scientific research, one factor which sets Britain clearly apart from our European competitors is the proportion of our government research budget devoted to defence. Whilst the French invest a little over 30%, the Germans around 10%, and the Italians only 5%, the United Kingdom concentrates 50% of its government research funds on military work.
Well, let's take up some of these points with our guests here in the studio now. Ray Noble, you're part of the movement to save British science. Do you feel that this dependence on defence spending is saving our science, or is it putting it at jeopardy?
Indeed, it is putting it in jeopardy. The other thing that sets us apart, if I may say so, is the fact that we're the only major industrial nation in recent years to cut, in real terms, the research budget on civil research and defence. All our major competitors are increasing that civil research budget. Japan, Germany, France are planning to increase it substantially.
And do you believe this translates directly into the success they're having and the comparative failure that we're enjoying?
Yes, I do. It increases to their success in being able to recruit first-rate scientists, to produce first-rate scientists, and to do the sort of work that is required, that industry ultimately will require.
Let's have a word, if we may, from Stephen Rose. Stephen, it's often said that commercial spin-offs develop from defence spending on research. Do you go along with that?
Well, unfortunately, there's very little evidence that that is the case, and indeed such surveys that have been done suggest that those companies which have a very heavy defence research commitment are less effective at developing civil research and have less investment in civil research projects than anywhere else. The answer doesn't lie there. The answer lies precisely in the fact that although Britain spends as high a proportion of its gross national product as any other country on science as a whole, there is that huge disproportion in defence science. What we've got to do is go for a major conversion program to switch from a defence-based research effort into a civil-based research effort. Why should we want anyone to go into this sort of science? We need a different sort of science.
John Exworthy, you have science graduates from the University of Southampton. Are they put off by the image of science? What are they going into?
Many of the graduates from Southampton in the science and engineering faculties go directly into industry because they see it as a vocational degree. That's what they wish to do, they're attracted to it, and they move to it and have happy careers. Now, that is not typical of the picture nationally, and there are very disquieting reports from around the country of large proportions of science and engineering graduates who are being wooed away. And predominantly the area they're going to, we heard of chartered accountants before, but the financial world at large.
And let's have a word from Ken Dunn, because you are head of a science department in a sixth form college in Southampton. I presume you saw teaching as a vocation. Do you see your future in teaching now, science teaching?
Well, I'd like to see my future in science teaching. I teach physics and electronics. I enjoy them both very much. I'm told I'm needed, but I cannot see that I can afford to keep my job for more than a few months longer. But it's worse than that. Not only am I looking for a new career when I don't want one because of financial constraints, But in the last year, I've lost my entire department to industry. Good people who want to teach, cannot afford to stay in, and are leaving at the rate of about 1 in 5. Things are getting worse and worse and worse. If you think it's bad at the moment, you ain't seen nothing yet.
Let's have a quick word from Dick West. If there is a demand, Dick, for science teachers, what do you say to the proposal that they should be paid more than other teachers?
I think to overtly set up different salary scales for teachers of different subjects, all teaching the same children, would be very divisive. I don't think the unions would accept it. I personally wouldn't accept it.
Well, let's, while we're on this subject, quickly come to the centre of the front row and have a word with Kate Ward, who's woman lecturer in engineering at the University of Southampton. How do you feel about spending more money, first of all, on wages for science teachers?
I think it would be disastrous to have any sort of salary structure which meant that artists got paid different amounts from scientists, particularly in higher education, which is my area. I think this would be a total disaster for the whole system, and I am very much against it. I think it would be extremely divisive, not just between faculties and universities, but within departments as well.
Ray Noble at the back there, is money the root of the problem as to why our young scientists are increasingly going abroad?
I think that that's only part of the problem. I think more substantially it is the lack of concrete career prospects for them in this country. We're going to be losing a lot of our top quality scientists because in order to do the work they want to do, to get the facilities that they need to do it, and furthermore, to have a reasonably secure chance of a decent career, they will be going to the United States of America, to Germany. They're being attracted there.
If I could give a typical personal experience, a couple of months ago I was in Paris at a round table organised by the French government, and I was very pleased when an independent firm of consultants based in the United States put my research group as one of the top ones in Europe in sensor technology. The next day I came back to the UK, and on my desk was a letter from the Science and Engineering Research Council saying that our work wasn't considered worthy of support. Now, that sort of anecdote you can hear over and over again in universities, and it just isn't happening anywhere else in Europe or the world at large.
There is one area we haven't looked at yet in this discussion, and that is industry, perhaps the sharpest end of all of the problem. John Parsons, you're a South Coast high-tech employer. Do you bear out the evidence from our earlier film that industry is not getting the sort of graduate output and indeed school leaver output that it needs to support it?
Yes, I think that's broadly true. I think there are several problems. As you say, it's a fundamental problem. There is the cultural problem as to whether or not industry is a worthwhile career. It also needs to form closer links and associations to influence the subjects that are being taught and indeed the research work which is going on. Because unless industry ultimately can exploit what we develop and produce, whether that be people or their skills, then it has no part to play. In Dorset we have recently set up an initiative to get an industrial governor onto the governing body of all secondary schools in Dorset, and I'm pleased to say that now is nearing completion. 38 of the 44 schools have such governors. And I think the communication link which is established by that means is very valuable in all directions. We must influence the pupils and the teachers of today, particularly the pupils who are going to be the teachers and the parents of tomorrow.
It's not just a question of projecting an image of industry to schools. Industry has got to learn far more about what schools are doing. They've got to learn that it's no use asking for physics in areas where physics isn't taught anymore. They've got to appreciate that new developments like integrated science, the great growth in things like technology in schools and electronics, microelectronics in schools, are very relevant to industry, and they've got to encourage this by saying, well, this is a good thing, this is a good attribute from young people that we can develop and attract them into industry.
What we have to do, if we say that we live in a country which is desperately in need of social and economic rejuvenation, all these issues actually hang together. We need to rejuvenate the way we handle science in the schools, in the universities, and throughout the industrial system. And that means turning around science from this machine-centered, this destructive image and picture and reality that it has at the moment, and turning it into a science which is really producing human-centered technologies and focusing on genuine human needs.
Thank you all very much. There are some who would argue that Britain doesn't need to be a trading nation anymore, that we should choose to survive on banking, insurance, royal weddings, and the other services that we seem particularly good at supplying to the rest of the world.
Whether that's a realistic choice or not is debatable, but what seems certain from tonight's programme is that if Britain doesn't start taking seriously how science and industry work together, as a trading nation, we'll be bankrupt, and any choice about our future will have been made for us. Good night.